right now the standard of care for stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer was based on combination of chemotherapy and radiation. And most of the previous trials that we've done were looking at modulation of radiation using new radiation techniques to try to make the outcomes better. We've thought of giving bigger doses of radiation to get better outcomes, but these trials were not successful at improving the cure rates we obtain for stage 3. Stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer is still a curable disease, so we expect that roughly 30% of our patients will be cured with chemoradiation. So that's where we are right now. So obviously we're trying to improve on that figure to cure more patients in that setting. So the PACIFIC data is being presented today and has been already published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So we have that data to review now. It's quite an impressive study in terms of the importance of the progression-free survival differences between the addition of durvalumab to chemoradiation. So for me, it's very provocative in the sense that it might very well become a standard of care for stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer. In the Canadian setting, I think we're going to see this differently compared to the United States market. Progression-free survival is not the outcome you would want to improve for stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer patients. Overall survival is probably the major point you need to address if you want to increase cure rates. So essentially, if you can cure more patients with durvalumab, which seems to be the case when you look at the progression-free survival curves, you might also expect that durvalumab can salvage patients that recur later on when they progress after chemoradiation. So if in the end overall survival is the same and the cure rates is the same whether you use durvalumab early or durvalumab late, then it might not be useful to treat every patient with stage 3 with upfront durvalumab. So I think that's what the overall survival data will show us. But my personal perspective is that it may well be positive for overall survival. I'm quite optimistic seeing the results we're seeing today. In the Canadian market, I think we need overall survival differences to justify the increased cost that 1 year of durvalumab will incur on the system. For patients, is improvement in progression-free survival enough for them to want added treatment following chemoradiation? That's a discussion I haven't had with my patients so far. I wouldn't be particularly in favor of pushing for such a treatment without clear overall survival differences, but I'm expecting this will become available soon enough, probably before ASCO next year. I've looked at the toxicity profile of PACIFIC. I've noticed that there was a slight increase in the expected immune-related adverse events that you might expect to see with durvalumab. In particular, I've looked at the pneumonitis rate, which is slightly improved compared to chemoradiation alone, but it's not as bad as I would have expected, knowing that durvalumab might increase pneumonitis just based on its mechanism of action. So I don't think toxicity will be a very big issue in our ability to use durvalumab after chemoradiation, so that's quite reassuring in that regard. And that wouldn't put me in a different situation of using durvalumab in the metastatic setting compared to using it after chemoradiation. The priming of immunotherapy by radiation is often referred to as an abscopal effect. So it's the possibility of the exposure of new antigens following destruction of cancer cells by radiation that leads to increase in the ability to immunotherapy to deliver T lymphocytes that recognize these antigens and give us better response rates and maybe better cure rates for this cancer. So obviously it's a very important hypothesis that we still don't have an answer to. There aren't many trials that actually show that radiation benefits immunotherapy treatments, but if in the end overall survival is very much increased by the early use of durvalumab after chemoradiation. It's going to be one of these trials that is referred to when we speak of the potentiation of checkpoint inhibitors with the radiation therapy.